Hello and welcome to Token for Your Thoughts, the podcast where we sit down with the people behind the companies shaping Web3. I'm your host, Lindsey McConaghy, and today I'm joined by Megan Knab, CEO and founder of Franklin Payroll. Franklin is a tax-compliant hybrid cash and crypto payroll service designed for Web3 companies. Megan has a background in accounting and product management and has held leadership positions at Web3 native firms since 2016. She's worked with Consensus, Drive Wealth, and most recently Serotonin, a Web3 marketing firm, and Product Studio, where she served as VP of Finance. Megan, welcome to the show.
So good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so great to have you with us today. Thanks for coming on. I use Franklin myself and absolutely love it. Payroll is obviously something that is pretty important for business owners, but it can be tricky in crypto. So I'm excited to dig into how you built Franklin and what you're seeing in the space. But first, I'd like to rewind a little bit to talk about your journey prior to Franklin and how you got here. So growing up, what were you drawn to? What were you interested in? Was it anything related to what you do now? Was it something totally different? Tell us about it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. Growing up, I wanted to be a figure skater.
Oh my gosh. Fun.
But it's interesting actually. And I think that like a lot of younger people out there, like people who are in high school or college or just starting their grad degrees, like it's almost hard to plan your career in some ways because crypto did not exist until I was like 25,
Right.
And so growing up, like I never thought like, okay, let me be in the cryptocurrency space, let me work in the tech space. Like I thought growing up working in tech meant you worked in IT, like fixing computers. And I thought that for like, even the start of my professional career.
Right.
And so, I think that I got into the blockchain and crypto space kind of opportunistically. I was working on Wall Street as an accountant, staff accountant in a back office of like a Wall Street firm. And I was going to business school at night, and I just learned about Ethereum pretty early on from a professor that I had. And
interesting.
Yeah, it was like very kind of like happenstance. There were a bunch of like happenstance things that helped me to get a job in this industry. Kind of like at the nascent stages of what it was. But it was a confluence of, I was working in this corporate accounting job and recognized a lot of inefficiencies and flaws and things that I thought were unfair as like this young, motivated person right out of college. When I was at my first like real or maybe like second real job, I ended up uncovering this large accounting fraud that was happening at the company I was working at. And
oh my gosh.
I was going to business school at night. I had learned about Ethereum through school. And it's like, Ethereum is this great tool to help create accountability and really solve this issue of corporate greed that I was dealing with in my job. And, long story short, that's really what got me very excited about this industry and what really motivated me to kind of go off and try and do some things on my own. Like, I don't really think of myself primarily as a creative person, as like as somebody who's like classically trained accounting. But I think it's such an exciting space, and so I've been really excited to kind of be like dedicating my like thought power and like energy in this industry for the last couple of years.
Yeah, wow, what a story. I love it. Figure skating, accounting, business school. That's awesome that you found out about Ethereum at the business schools. Was it part of a class that you were taking, or was the professor just particularly interested in it and so was telling you guys about it?
we had, going for people out there who like go to school at night and work during the day, it can be so brutal, and a lot of ways it's like the learning experience is like not that exciting because you're just trying to get through each, or that's at least how it was for me. I think that's how it was for some of my classmates at the time too. But our professor gave us the night off and said that she would collect our attendance if we went to a lecture instead. It's like, okay, this is an easy check the box. I'll go sit at this lecture and just like zone out, whatever. And it was actually the lecture was by Nate Popper, who had recently written a book, and that was the first time I had ever heard about blockchains. Like a lot of the kind of like branding of the event was around Bitcoin, but in his kind of like fireside chat, he talked a lot about this concept of a blockchain, of an immutable ledger, essentially like a database that, is inherently trustworthy. And that just got me really interested. It sort of like planted the bug in my brain. And spent a lot of time thinking about that after that experience. And that's kind of the genesis of it.
Awesome. Yeah, what a great intro too, to actually have a full class and to actually get some deeper understanding of it so that you can actually, because I think the first time a lot of people hear about crypto, it's like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard about it and it just like blew my mind. Oh, that's awesome. What a cool happenstance of finding out about it. And what was your first impression? Were you like, this sounds bizarre, crazy, or this is really cool?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a mix of all of the above. I also had the benefit, at the time I lived in Bushwick, Brooklyn, which, I was living with a bunch of people in like an apartment. I'm a New Yorker. And I would go to this cafe in Bushwick on the weekends and I would do my homework for grad school. And in this cafe, there were a lot of people that were doing a similar kind of thing. Got to be kind of friendly with them. And then one day some guy was like, hey, in the back of this cafe, there is a cryptocurrency startup. And it ended up being a company called Consensus, which was like a very early company, like venture product studio in the Ethereum space. And just kind of followed this guy into the back of the warehouse cafe. Long story short,
I love it.
Working at a project that was funded by Consensus.
Oh my gosh.
I think like it's weird. Like I think if all these things didn't happen, and part of it I think is being at a place kind of like randomly where there is like a little bit of a movement starting, and that's really really shaped my life in a lot of ways. It's funny, like small happenstances, but I think like I was certainly in the beginning intrigued because it seemed like something that was kind of avant-garde. It seemed logically to me like a really interesting technical solution to some issues that I was having or like thought problems I had. I was certainly like pretty cautious in the beginning, but honestly, the intrigue of the early days working in the Ethereum ecosystem was certainly like the kind of like draw where I was like, okay, I think that this is like actually something that's transformative. I think it's the future, and like, let me drop out of my MBA, let me quit my job, let me like do these things to kind of jump in and really learn and like take a little bit of a professional risk for the pursuit of knowledge. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That's pretty incredible. Just like, seeing it as a movement and this exciting space and just really taking the leap and going all in. That's awesome. And I guess like being in a place where you could actually go and meet people and see what it's about too. And because sometimes like, I've worked in co-working spaces and there is just like an energy about them. And, when there's startups, and it's difficult to describe, but you kind of feel it being there. And I guess it can just be exciting, and you just want
100%.
that.
And I think that is one of the unique things about the blockchain ecosystem, the public blockchain ecosystem and crypto in general, is that like one of the features of the technology is actually its community. And we could talk more about that, but that was something that was so important to me, especially, having I was a young woman working in a Wall Street job, and there were a
Mm-hmm.
lot of sort of like ways that I felt about that, and ways that I felt like I was maybe not treated the way that I thought I should have been treated, and going
Mm-hmm.
with these people, in this new kind of nascent technology space, it felt very welcoming to me, and it still does. And so that was all like part of the attraction of digging into it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's really great to hear because I think, the crypto space can also have a bit of a reputation of like, crypto bros. So, that's really refreshing to hear that your experience was that it was very welcoming, compared to, that traditional Wall Street space that does also can have that reputation. So that's really, really nice to hear. And so what was your role then in the first few companies in Web3? Was it in accounting? Was it something else?
Yeah, so it was sort of like I took whatever job I could get, basically. And my first job in crypto, I think I was like an operations coordinator. And so, that was sort of like a catch-all type thing. I was
Mm-hmm.
doing accounting. I was helping on the legal side of, the startup space, like figuring out corporate structuring, corporate strategy, fundraising, those kinds of things. Yeah, it was something where I touched like a lot of different parts of the business, a little bit on product development. Um, and, in those days, like late 2016, early 2017, it was at the beginning of like or maybe like height too of like the ICO boom. It
Yeah.
was looking at the space and thinking about like, what are all these people doing? What are they getting wrong? What are they getting right? How do we think like, what is the real like value proposition of like what we want to do here?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a lot of what my early like kind of responsibilities and roles was figuring out like, okay, we have this new asset class. We are based in the United States. We want to operate within the rules and regulations of the US. Like, how do we think about holding these assets on our balance sheet? How do we think about
Mm-hmm.
the risks of moving it around? What is the tax obligation? And all those things to me then were, and still are, but a lot of these questions are kind of answered now, are
Mm-hmm.
really interesting to think about. Um, and they were questions that like not a lot of people were asking back then. And so
Okay.
I, started writing a blog about like, how do you think about accounting for a DAO? Like, what does that even mean? Like, let's analyze
Yes.
transaction. And so for this very kind of like small group of people that were interested in this space, like I had this little bit of like cult following, I would say.
Yeah. I bet if no one else is talking about it, these are really important questions too.
Yeah, like for 100%. And there was no guidance. There's still like a lot of gray space, and there's so many like great people in this space now who have like really like, they come from the best big four accounting firms. They have tons of experience that bring really fresh perspectives into it. But, it really felt like a frontier. I was not really, like I was only a little kid, but it felt like what it must have been like during like the .com boom,
Mm-hmm.
this transformative technology. You have the potential of e-commerce. Like, how is this going to transform how we interact, how businesses interact? And I think like that was something I recognized then, and it's something that I'm still really excited about now. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the quick overview. Did a little bit of everything. Always kind of spent a little bit more time on the accounting side.
Right. Yeah. And how did you find that? Because that's obviously wearing a lot of hats. It's starting multiple jobs at once, not just, okay, this is my new job and how do I do this? I think, some people might find that overwhelming. Other people love that startup life where you're just kind of mucking in, figuring out things as you go. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. Like, I think most people that work at startups or people who start up businesses have that kind of all of those feelings at once sometimes, where it's like, this is overwhelming. There's way too much to do. How am I supposed to answer all these questions? And also like it's very exhilarating and fun. And as long as you think that you're solving or like trying to answer a question that's interesting, like that's almost enough motivation to keep going. Um, I think that there is like a very real dynamic that exists like specific to accounting culture at companies, which is like, and there's like this perception of accountants as like, the guy on Office Space who's like this weird freak sitting in like that corner. And like, you know, I have certainly experienced something similar where, talking to like executives in my past job where they kind of are just like, okay, you're just this barrier to get to what I want, or you're the stickler for the rules. And,
Mm-hmm.
accounting in a lot of ways is really like the language of business, and the guardians of like that information and those controls like get shafted a lot. And so one of the things that like I was really interested in trying to figure out is like, how do you change some of the power dynamics between somebody who's working in-house in an accounting vibe, or somebody who's like maybe an outsourced accountant, to like executive leadership. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a like issue that's been cracked, to be honest, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's this like weird cultural shift in business that needs to take place. And it's like one of the things that like I think is kind of cool to try and figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that perspective of accounting is the language of business, because it's so true. I mean, yeah, you gotta be on top of your finances. Finance is a very important part of having a business. If things aren't straightened out, you can't have a business. So yeah, I like having that perspective as opposed to, seeing it as like, I don't know, being an obstacle, or you're right, like someone trying to, emphasize like rules, or I don't know, stifle things. So yeah, absolutely. I love that. All right. So it would be great to hear about the genesis of Franklin. What led you towards going off on your own, starting a business? People come across problems every day. Not everyone says, I'm going to start a business. So how did you come to start Franklin?
Yeah, well, I think like the first thing is like more people should start businesses. I like very strongly about that. Like there's so many inefficiencies out there, and like rather than complaining about it or being frustrated by it or just taking it as the norm, like it's totally possible. Like start a business, see if you can solve that problem. It comes with a lot of trials and tribulations, but like I think there are a lot of ideas out there that are very worthwhile that never even get the light of day because people don't want to take that step into company.
Yeah.
For myself, this is my second startup actually. So I started up an accounting software for crypto specifically back in 2018, and did that for a few years. And learned quite a lot from that experience around like the commercialization of like software and things like that. But Franklin, which is a hybrid payroll, hybrid cash and crypto payroll platform, really was born out of the struggle that I had operating a Web3 balance sheet. And what I mean by that, I was working at a consulting firm called Serotonin, which is a Web3 marketing firm. It was started up by Amanda Cassett, who is an alum of Consensus, and she kind of tapped me on the shoulder to come in and help her figure out how to scale the company beyond like the bootstrap that she had done. So, we took the company from, around 12 people to over 60 employees. We took it from, a couple $1,000s in revenue to over $1 million in monthly revenue. And that kind of scale and working in the Web3 space, like it puts a lot of pressure on the back office. And so, myself as kind of the person trying to help like guide strategy a little bit, as well as like the person with hands to the keys, like, okay, we have bills to pay, we have payroll, we have all these things. We have money coming in USD, we have it coming in crypto, it's on different chains. It's like a non-trivial issue. And so for us, like the biggest issue was figuring out like, how do we pay this global team of people correctly, in a tax compliant way, on a regular basis, and how do we provide them with the incentive structure that's competitive with some of the top Web3 startups, which meant we have to have perks, we have to be able to offer them the option of crypto, and things like that. And so for me, there was really nothing out there. And there's very few options out there that kind of allow for this kind of structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, prototyped the idea for Franklin within Serotonin. Previously, I had worked as a product manager, back, I have like gone back and forth to Wall Street firms in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of brought in the team to help try and like see like, is this a problem that we can actually solve? And then did some kind of research around like, is there really like a market for this, or are we this like weird outlier? And it turned out like, no, we're like a lot of other businesses that, we have stable coins on our balance sheet and we want to put them to use, but hey, that's really expensive. We don't want to pay $1 zillion to a bunch of tax accountants at the end of the year to figure out like what our liabilities were that were not like transparent to us as we were transacting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the genesis for Franklin. So, I had like a pretty high level of confidence when we were thinking about starting to spin this out as like a real business and like a tech company, that the technology worked. There was a market, and it just was really exciting. And I was kind of looking around and was like, why isn't anybody else doing this? Like, I can't really be the only one. But like the first, if not, some people might argue with that, but it was like among the first kind of like market to offer this kind of like multi-currency balance sheet financial operations tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. And I love it. You're just like, okay, this is what we need. There's nothing out there. So rather than just coming back and, I don't know, just reporting that, it's like, well, actually, here's a proposal, here's a solution that we could create to solve this problem. Would you describe yourself as like being a risk taker growing up? I mean, because it takes, it's a big risk starting a company and trying to build something that doesn't exist. It takes, a lot of like persistence and problem solving and, challenges. So, I mean, is that something that you think just your background or growing up, have you always had that approach to problems or other areas of life?
It's a really interesting, like, that you ask, like, nobody really asks honestly about, like, how does your whole life come together? No, not at all. I had, like, a very interesting childhood, and, my parents passed away when I was young, and really, like, when I was in my early, like, college, young 20s life, I was supporting my brother. I, like, was trying to make it on my own kind of thing, and this idea of just going out onto your own and doing something where you really don't have a fallback option or you don't have like a steady salary, it was crazy. It was so crazy to do. And even like back, even now, I'm like kind of like, what am I doing? Like, this is so insane. But I think it takes like a level of confidence in yourself and confidence in your like ability to just be like, okay, I personally will be okay. I think that this is like worth figuring out how to solve this problem. And it might be more than okay. It might be something that's super worthwhile for me and for everybody who uses it. And I think that there is like a little level of recklessness you have to accept when you start up a business of your own. But that's really like, a lot of the people that we work with, and one of the like, things that I love about doing this is like I got to work with a lot of people like me.
Yeah.
Who have an idea, who are really excited about it and want to make it a thing. And there are all these things that go along with running a business that like can trip you up. And it's like, why don't we just make it easier for entrepreneurs to execute? Like, you should be able to run a business on chain and like have it exist in the real world, take care of all the taxes and like nitty-gritty stuff. Like, that's my area of expertise, and like, let's help bring all these great services and technologies to be. And so that's kind of, I don't know, like, probably it's like a reckless decision, but I'm down with it.
Yeah, no, it is kind of all the things. Like, it's exciting, it's adventurous. It's awesome to think, okay, let's go out and solve this. And especially when you're experiencing the problem, because then you really personally can relate and you understand how great it would be to have a solution for this big problem. But it is like, it's challenging and it's uncomfortable and it's risky. So there's that to kind of balance it off. And yeah, a lot of people weigh it up and I guess want to stay kind of safe, in the harbor. But it is great, hearing when people are just like, let's just do this and give it a go. Because yeah, it does take a lot to go out on your own. And especially something like being tax compliant in crypto. I mean, that is like no small feat. And am I correct? You have to, there's 50 states, in the US. So you have to have an individualized solution and make sure that you're tax compliant across all 50 states. It's not just, okay, let's figure out what the rules are. You have to do it 50 different times. I mean, that sounds pretty daunting to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of nuance, and it's, it's not only just the state, it's like your city, your township.
Oh my gosh.
Like there's, they say, there's like, for each paycheck, there's up to 250,000 permutations of like one paycheck.
My goodness.
And
what?
So, yeah, it's wild. And then like, let's say you have 10 staff, let's say you have 500 staff, right? There's like this exponential kind of like data problem that you have. And you have these kind of like antiquated counterparties. So like, Pennsylvania, they don't publish their tax rates online. You have to call them. They do there's all these like crazy things. And so, well before I started Franklin, the tax code, which to me was like this like big unknown. And like just logically, I was like, why is it so hard to figure out like how much I might owe if I move somewhere else? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, I'm getting a bonus. Like, why don't I know how much is actually going to land in my bank account?
Yeah.
And all this stuff is public knowledge. Like the tax code is open source, but it is so complicated. It is not uniform. And so, I mean, I spent time figuring out like, how do we think about open sourcing this like income tax like database in the United States? There's a lot to think about around there, but that's like, we are like a Web3 native company. We spend a lot of time thinking about tax data, and particularly like since we started Franklin up, like this at the advent of LLMs and like this new AI technology has really transformed the way that we operate. It's transformed the way that we like consume and calculate and think about some of these complex data problems. And like, that's something else that's like really exciting. It's a great time to be an entrepreneur, honestly, in the tech space. So
yes, right. So would you say that with the onset of these AI tools becoming available, was that how did that change things? Was it, because like you said, you're dealing with a ton of different, a lot of data across all these states and cities. So was that kind of a big game changer for you? Or
I think early on, so ChatGPT was released, I think like 9 months after we formally spun out Franklin and started it up. I remember there was somebody who put a Solidity contract through ChatGPT to debug it and then published it. And we were like, oh my God, like this is gonna be like the craziest thing ever, because it's like this well-known contract and it did have a flaw in the logic that nobody had exposed yet. And it was like, wow, technology is going to be so powerful and it's going to completely change everything. Logically, I think we knew that. Operationally, like there were things that like we saw some improvements in how productive we could be. So like GitHub Copilot, very helpful. It's kind of like early where it helps you finish writing code. It pulls from these open source libraries. Like we saw a lot more code being produced from our engineering team, which was awesome. We saw things like in the like graphic design and just general design space by Figma and Canva, like just smarter interpretations and kind of like finishing your thought in terms of like, what is a UX flow? How do you actually want to design this graphic? So I think like early on we saw like a lot of efficiencies, but lately we've been playing around with training these LLM models to be able to consume these massive unstructured data sets. And yeah, I mean, we're like very much still in the experimental stage, but as an example, like the most payroll companies in the US are serviced by 2 tax calculators. They're closed source.
Oh.
They're owned by the biggest payroll companies in the world, and they're very expensive. They're super antiquated. Like one of them just released an API this summer, like very, very old school, dealing with massive drop CSV files. We've been able to like recreate a lot of this technology by training these LLM models. And as far as we've been able to tell, it's like extremely efficient. It's a hell of a lot cheaper. And like we have a lot of more testing to do and things like that, but it's really exciting. And it's like, we're just a small player. Like I'm sure all these bigger companies are like thinking about ways to kind of like deal with this stuff. And it's very exciting to me when you think about like the programmability of cryptocurrencies and particularly stablecoins, along with the efficiencies that you can get from LLMs and like seeing how they're all going to marry together. Like it's going to be a different world, and it's really exciting to see.
Yeah, no, it has really been incredible. And it sounds like you just jumped right in. It's been really interesting to see people's different approaches. I think some people are still a little bit like, oh, AI, I just don't want to, I don't know, they don't kind of want to dive in, and they find it scary, and they maybe just want to keep the world how it is. And then other people who are just like, as soon as it came out, just wanted to tinker it with it and are finding ways to improve efficiency or, like you said, train the models. So it's always interesting hearing how people have, reacted to it. But it's incredible how fast things have changed, and how the different models are already out, and then all the applications suddenly and AI agents. Yeah, it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
So yeah, going back to you starting Franklin and figuring out all of these things with the tax code, calling up Pennsylvania to find out, what their rules are. Was it just you? Did you have a team? I mean, what did that look like in the early days?
Yeah, no, it was certainly not just me. And honestly, I would not have started up this company if it would have been just me.
Right. Yeah.
But I had worked on setting up a crypto trading desk at an equities broker, and pulled some of the guys who are so amazing to help me kind of like prototype Franklin and get into its initial go-to-market, and we expanded from there. And so, I think like I'm not a software engineer, like I'm not actually really code, like having people that could really take these ideas and like make them better and actually like operationalize and execute was something we started from the beginning. And it's kind of wild to just like have an idea and be like, hey, I think this is going to be a thing. And especially something that was like kind of, avant-garde, like, hey, we should have crypto payroll. Like even now when I'm saying it, I'm like, this is so nuts, But was able to convince some of these guys to come in and help me, and it's been amazing. And I think even then, like something, I have this like good like group of women in New York specifically who have started up tech companies, and some of them are technical, some of them are not technical, and like I think especially when you're going the venture funded route, like first of all, having a man with you is helpful, to you, largely you're talking to male VCs, like a lot of young men as like the first, like kind of like barrier to like funding conversations, and just figuring out how to kind of like make people feel comfortable with you and your idea, right? Like that's something that's helpful. And then also being able to demonstrate that you have that like technical expertise and execution ability is really, important, I think, when you're going that route of trying to get VC funding. But I think something that we talk about a lot among like this like little, support group, I would say I have,
yeah,
a lot of the early tech is going to get thrown away. you put together a proof of concept. It doesn't really scale, but it like maybe solves this like one part of a problem, and like having some code thrown down to show like, hey, this is interesting and it works, like is very important for those earlier conversations. But it takes a lot to get from that to like your first customer, and then from that to figuring out how to scale. And so, along the startup journey, it's like you work with a lot of different people that have like a lot of different skill sets. And I think for myself, and I'm sure for others as like founders, it's like, oh my God, do I have the ability to go from startup to prototype to customers to trying to scale? And yeah, there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, no, that's really good to know, because I think a lot of people do see the finished product and, come across companies when they have an established customer base. So it's really nice to hear that of like, okay, what you first build might look absolutely nothing like, what you end up bringing to market. And there are these various stages that you go through, and that is normal. It's not necessarily like, okay, I don't know, it's like a sign of a failure. It's just that can be a normal part of how you get to market with a software project. So yeah, that's interesting to know. And so what was the most, I guess, unexpected challenge you had getting the business off the ground?
And I don't know where to begin.
Which one? But there are just too many.
I think that there is, I like Franklin was really like this thing that came out of like my brain and my own user experience. And then getting it into the hands of people who wanted a solution to their problem, but maybe thought about having that manifest in different ways, like was very interesting. So, our like earliest users were like, why do I have to go this way? Like a lot of feedback on user experience. And that was like extremely valuable. And then I think like a lot of, I saw something somewhere like on Twitter, something that was like, a lot of first-time founders think mostly about product, and, second time or whatever, multi-time founders think about go-to-market. Where it's almost, I think if you're starting a tech solution now, it's like, yeah, you're going to be able to build a solution. And it's like, do you have the, like an innovative strategy to get people to use it? And that's something like I kind of think like very naively, where I was like, okay, we're just going to build the best thing, and it's like first, and then people are going to use us, and then, do amazing things. And that was like semi-true. But like also when you're doing a venture scale a startup, you really have to invest in those go-to-market strategies. And, I was the head of finance at a marketing firm. Like I didn't really know what it meant to like market something, market a brand, market a product, market yourself. And those are all still things that I'm learning, and it's cool, right? To kind of like get to start a business, and then like you're just in this constant like spate of learning. But I think that that's like one big thing. Another big thing is just, I think some people sometimes think like, okay, you're starting up a company and it's so great because you don't have a boss anymore. And it's like, no, like a zillion bosses, like every customer, like they're your boss, like every investor, like you just have a lot of people that you serve, and they all need a very high level of attention, as opposed to having a manager, you know what I mean? And so, I think it was something I was prepared for, but I didn't like fully internalize it until I read it,
Yeah, that is a really good perspective, actually. I've actually never thought about it that way, but you're right, because you always hear, be your own boss, and but you're right. Like when you do have your own business, you have to answer and serve your customers and, investors. Absolutely. Yeah, there's probably a long list of people.
Yeah.
But it's just in a different way to, traditionally having a manager. So tell us a bit about the service that Franklin offers, because, I've seen a lot of companies out there that can facilitate payments, but, a lot of the companies I came across before I came across Franklin was just with contractors or freelancers. They did not touch W-2 employees. So that's something incredible that you guys offer. Tell us a bit about that and then the other services that you offer for businesses out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of payments companies out there that say they service payroll, but they focus primarily on money movement, and payroll is a lot more than just moving funds from A to B. And this was like important for me and for like the thesis behind Franklin to launch with is like, you can have an employee in the United States who can get paid in crypto in a tax compliant way. And our platform has been live for 2 years now or so, and like that has always been the core of what we offer. But we do a lot more now. So, like we were kind of alluding to before, is like the US has like an extremely complex tax code. There are a lot of labor regulations that you have to be thinking about when you are employing people. And so our thesis was like, you should be able to have all of those considerations ticked off and be able to operate your company on chain if you want to. And so some of the innovation when we first started was like, okay, we're hybrid. We can do fiat, you can do crypto. We're tax compliant. We will withhold and remit taxes and do all the filings and blah, 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 blah. Now where we're at is like it's interesting, like stable coins are really having a moment. And not just a moment, like I think that, they've been around for like, I think Circle launched 12 years ago. So 12 years, like now, like we're seeing more and more payments companies and other sorts of like financial services firms sort of waking up to the power that a stable coin or a programmable dollar has. And for us, like payroll is like this great use case where, a paycheck can get split up into 10, 15 different sort of like complex payments that happen. And all of the reports that go around with that, like a stable coin is like the perfect solution. So that's really what we like focus on. We do, if you want to pay somebody ETH or Bitcoin or other kinds of like your company has your own token, like there are a lot of other kinds of like accounting tax considerations that go in with those kinds of payments that we can also facilitate. But the stable coin is really the thing that we're most excited about. And, there are a lot of benefits to an employer where like, okay, you can pay people faster, you can pay them cheaper, you can pay them more efficiently. For payroll providers in general, which is really not our target market, but I think we're starting to see other payroll companies, like competitors of ours, look at us and be like, how are you leveraging stablecoins as an alternative to ACH? Like, ACH chargeback risk is a massive problem in payroll. Like, stablecoins are 100% a solution to that. Like, that's like a big innovation at like this sort of like corporate level.
So interesting.
That we're excited about, but we do. Yeah, I mean, our bread and butter is servicing companies in Web3 that have some exposure to crypto assets and want to put it to work. And so that's what we're all about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And do you have like a typical customer of, any particular sector that you see a lot of your customers in? I mean, what do they look like? Are there any trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, so we definitely our bread and butter customers really like a company that is in or aligned with the Web3 space. So perhaps you're a startup and you are building a protocol, or you get funded with stable coins as part of your investment round. You have them on your balance sheet. You need to put them to work. Like Franklin can help you there. Like we can do crypto to crypto. We can off-ramp crypto to USD. What have you. There are a lot of different permutations there, or companies that are kind of adjacent, I would say. So like you're in some sort of like professional services field servicing crypto companies, and perhaps you're taking in revenue in crypto. Like we can help you there too. There is this other kind of profile of customer that I didn't really expect to see when we started this company, which is like this kind of like gig economy employer where you have sort of like compressed cash flows. For example, like a nursing staffing company, you get paid from the hospital in a paper check once a month. And if that check gets lost in the mail, like how do you pay your staff? they end up creating these complex like loan agreements with like basically like payday lenders. Very expensive for the staffing company, not great for the people who are getting paid, like or like a construction staffing company is like another example. And so those are things like that we're like very interested into digging into more of, like how can stablecoins help with the speeding up cash flows and creating more just efficient like T0 like type payment types where you don't have to wait 5 days for a check to get direct deposited into your account. So there's some of that we are looking into and excited about there.
Yeah, that sounds so interesting. All these problems that you can provide solutions for. And what an interesting time where on the one hand, we're talking about paper checks getting delivered through the mail still, and then stablecoins and crypto, like just coexisting, just two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess to wrap up, what would be something you'd want to leave our listeners with, whether it's a piece of advice or one of the, I don't know, best lessons you feel like you've learned on this journey that you would like to share? Is there anything you would like to leave us with?
Man, yeah. I think that like there is a lot of, I think maybe to the entrepreneurs out there, there's a lot of noise and a lot of opinions that come your way when you decide to start up a business. And it is very easy to get distracted. And so sticking kind of to your guns, like let's prove out the initial thesis and obviously being flexible when you need to be, but like really just like keep your head down, like build, like get somebody to like buy what you're offering. And if you can, like that's a big proof point. I would say that. And then, I think that sometimes people get a little bit intimidated by the idea of starting up a business because it's like, okay, I have this great idea for how to solve this problem, or I'm like a developer and I know I can like create code to build an application or a protocol that can solve this problem, but I don't want to deal with the business stuff. Like the business side, it is solvable. And it is not that hard. It's just like a different area of expertise and like it's possible to do. So that's what I would say. I think like I love entrepreneurs. I think like it's so great like to go out there and like try and like compete against these big gorilla companies, because a lot of them like, they have a lot of legacy tech. They're not providing the best user experience. They're not providing the best solutions, and they deserve to be disrupted. And so we should all go out there and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really great advice. I think it definitely makes sense. You can get lost sometimes if you're focusing too much externally on, opinions or comparison, which, the old saying goes, can be the thief of joy. So yeah, I think it's just smart to focus on what you're doing, believe in yourself, heads down. That's really great advice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been so wonderful talking to you and hearing your story. What an incredible story. And I'm so glad you decided to take the leap and start Franklin. It's an absolutely fantastic solution for companies out there that need to pay in crypto. So thanks for telling us about it. What's the best place for people to find out more about Franklin and connect with you?
Yeah, sure. Check us out at hellofranklin.co or at Franklin Payroll on Twitter.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you, Megan. That's it for today's episode of Token for Your Thought. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to follow the podcast and stay tuned for more interviews with people building Web3. Thanks again for coming on, Megan.
Thanks a lot, Lindsey.